This conference will now be recorded.
Yeah, so this is all about Azure portal, wherein like when you are working on cloud environment, in reference to the cloud, usually there are two prominent cloud service providers we will be having. So one is AWS, like Amazon Web Services is the first thing. So followed by this, Windows Azure is Microsoft Azure is one more cloud service provider, which is actively involving in different activities. As you know, like whatever the Microsoft Azure account to be created, so this is an account which can be created easily, and this will be available for a couple of months for the usage purpose. Even for the training as well, people can use it. So we have an option where we can start the free Azure trial version where that can be used here. So you can see here. At the same time, Azure have different services where we have to create different sources here. At the same time, if you want to create any kind of virtual machines in reference to the Azure itself is concerned, this virtual machines can be created so virtually so that we can connect with that and can be used accordingly. At the same time, even if you want to connect any kind of uh, databases, if you want to connect to any of the databases like SQL, all that stuff, structured query languages, wherein this can also be utilized under Azure services. Because anyway, if you see any application, we have three different layers. One is front end, second is back end, and third is middle tier. So front end options, what are all the options are available on front end, how it is to be used and all will be maintained in it. Whereas as far as the backend itself is concerned, backend is completely relating to the databases, what is that we are creating, so that we need to create some drivers like thin driver, type 1 driver, type 2 driver, JDBC, ODBC drivers has to be created, especially when you are working on Java applications or something of that sort. At the same time, not only that, we can write different query languages and all, something like SQL and all, everything can be written. Using these query languages of SQL and all, whatever the database creations and all can also be done accordingly. So that's how generally this SQL databases and all everything is being used for. So here we have an option where we can create databases, SQL databases, where this can be connecting with the existing cloud service providers, what is that we are using. At the same time, Kubernetes and all, which is something used exclusive for DevOps environment, because when we are working on agile as well as DevOps environment in application development. So whenever we are using cloud services for any of the services, even DevOps Connect is also something essentially required to start with. So for that, this Kubernetes, Ansible, all these will be used in this context. So these are the different services wherein you can see, apart from Azure, whatever the trial version of Azure we have, so that can be used. At the same time, of course, Active Directory management using Azure Active Directory is also one of the parts. So that's a different story anyway altogether. Now, if you want to create any kind of resources, here we have an option where we can create a resource here. So here you have an option where you can create a resource. So this resource we have to select here. This is how generally creation of resources. Do remember, whatever I'm explaining you about the creation of resource, how to create the resource is what we need to. So in reference to the creation of resource can be created, either you can create a virtual machine resources here. At the same time, we can connect with different data factories, or else if you are connecting any kind of web applications, all this can be used here. That's what generally it is being used. At the same time, for example, if you want to have any kind of analytics, like if you want to create any kind of analytical reports or something of that sort, we have different options which are available, especially to maintain infrastructure, because we have three different services are there in cloud. Usually one we call it as PWS, stands for platform as a service. That is point number one. So apart from platform as a service, the next is we call it as SaaS, which we call it as software as a service. At the same time, IaaS stands for infrastructure as a service. Whatever this elastic cloud, all that stuff, something relating to the infrastructure as a service, all that. At the same time, MongoDBs and all everything can be used. And do remember, this is a cloud account, but everything won't be available free of cost to us, as it is an account we are using for training purpose and all. It is not possible for us to use all the options. Point to be noted, where we have to use paper as you go service kind of stuff. Means some of the tools, something like MongoDB, Elastic Cloud, at the same time Confluence Cloud. All these things are majorly used paper use kind of stuff. You can pay and you can use the services accordingly. That's how generally the process will goes on. So now in reference to that analytics, this is what and how it will be. Now, for example, if you want to have any kind of security related options and all that, this is how generally the security options were. So being an cloud service provider, when you are working on Windows, Azure, Microsoft Azure platform in reference to the administrative activities, especially in reference to the administrative activities of the content, what is that? Are we going to discuss something like 104? Because 104 Microsoft Azure is an admin related activity where we need to understand the administrative activities, how it is to be configured and how it is to be managed. Do remember, when you want to interact with administrative activities or when you want to use administrative activities, make sure you need to have infrastructure support as well, because infrastructure support is also essentially important, wherein that also can be used. That is one thing. At the same time, if you want to have any kind of migrations to be done, any migration related activities and all, here you have an option where you can connect with migration, where you can create a backup and site recovery, right? That is what generally here you have an option called create. Just click on create. I'm talking about migrate part. Okay, so migration part. So click on migrate, where you can see if you want to start any kind of trial version of Azure. So this is what and how generally this trial version has to be used. But if you want to have a trial version, as I told you, start free, where this start free, where you can use different trial versions which are available here. Wherein we can use this sign up option here, where we have to provide whatever the necessary informations and all, everything can be used here accordingly, is what we need to do. At the same time, of course, this will be available for 12 months, because whatever the free account we have and all, everything will be valid for 12 months. But do remember, we need to provide some credit card information. Card information has to be provided here. Of course, they don't charge anything for that, unless until if you are selecting any paper use kind of stuff, that is be used, that will be used. Otherwise, we don't require to use any other things else apart, right? So that's what generally we usually have, right? So generally we need to provide some card information, so wherein we need to identify and verify the card details, so that whatever the related and required information to be added to the existing one, so this Azure account will be used for the next 12 months, and whatever the related and relevant activities to be maintained, so everything can be maintained for the next 12 months, is what the advantage we have under Azure. This is what generally. Here you can see there is an option of creation resource, where we are connecting to the databases here, wherein if you want to create a selected databases and all, wherein for that even you need to have a trial version to access with. That is something essentially important when you are working on the resources. If you want to create any kind of resources, all that stuff, so those are the things which are essentially important when you are working on it. Either it could be virtual machines, or you want to connect with web apps, or if you want to connect with SQL databases, all that stuff. At the same time, we have an option where we can see the options, something relating to app services, whatever the application services we have, those application services can be used here, wherein by managing all these active directory informations, which are essentially important when you are working on the Azure platform. So in this Azure platform, here we can see whatever the Azure directory services we have, whatever the administrative units, roles of administrative units, whatever the different administrative activities. In reference to the administration I'm talking about, because ours is completely towards Microsoft Azure 104 admin, which is called as Agent 104, of course, right? This is what generally we are focusing more on. So on this context, I'm explaining this to you, right? I hope you have understood this. Where you need to have, this is how generally roles of an administrator, whatever the roles do we have, and whatever the assignments to be downloaded here, and how to add filters, because adding filters will make you to work on the application much easier, because unless until if you are not adding the filters, it would be difficult for you to perform it. So adding filters and all, everything were essentially required. Adding filters and all will help you to move further to the next level. That's what generally we can do. right? So adding filters can be done. You can add the filters, depends on the kind of services it will be. For example, if there is any service wherein we need to apply for application of the services, right? So here we can we can see. So you can see the services of applications has been added to the existing thing, wherein whatever the related and relevant information in reference to the description of a particular application administrative activities, all this information can be seen here. At the same time, the kind of permissions in terms of the role, what exactly it was, those permission links and all everything will also be available here accordingly. This is what generally one of the information which normally it has. At the same time, we have an option called audit logs, where whatever the related information and whatever the activities we have performed so far, whenever we are working on the application, whatever the activities we have performed, whatever the roles we have performed in regular intervals, whatever the audit logs we have, all these audit log information will be updated here. It's a continuous process. Whatever we have seen is a continuous process which normally we can see, right? So because if you are working anything of that sort, generally audit logs will be there, so that in that audit logs you can see. And if you want to download any kind of information which is something related and relevant to that, so all this can be downloaded here accordingly. At the same time, if you want to access any kind of reviews and all, where we need to provide more information in relating to that, you can search by name. If there is any name was there, so herein you can search by name, and you can take valid licenses and all everything, and it can be used accordingly. That is also one more thing which you can do. Apart from that, if you want to diagnose and as well as solve the problems, there is an option where you can view the guidances, and whatever the new support activities in reference to the requests and all everything can be seen. As a administration administrator, or as a role of administration, when we are working on, make sure when we are working on administration and all, so these are the roles which are applicable. So these are the roles which are essentially important, and these are the roles which are essentially required for us to perform. This is what generally we normally use it. So these are the different global administrator as well as the permission roles which will be available online, which we have to make use of it in regular intervals while we are working on administrative activities here. Whatever that it could be in role you are specifying an application administrator itself. At the same time, either you can identify that application developer is in one more administrator role. Or these two are the different roles which can be selected here, and these can be used here accordingly. Depends on the kind of requirements what we have, the kind of applications what is that we are going to do, and how are you going to access these informations above all that. So this is how generally this role creations as well as identification of the roles, and whatever the roles we have identified, that can be used here accordingly. Depends on the kind of information what is that we have created, all that. At the same time, if you want to have any kind of private features and all everything, of course, that's not something more relevant, because whatever the related features relating to the administrative part, everything can be seen here. We can see. At the same time, if you want to see any kind of bulk operation results and all, everything can be seen here, as I mentioned some time back to you. Apart from that, if you want to see any kind of support request in reference to the problem description, if there is any, right? For example, point to be noted, if there is any problem which you have been identified, and if you want to see any kind of description in reference to the problems, what is that we have, so this information has to be selected. For example, if there is an issue in reference to subscription management, for example, right? So problem type, right? For example, purchase and sign up, all that stuff. Unable to subscribe, right? So here you need to write down the summary, wherein if you are clicking on it, so that whatever the recommended solutions will be shown to us automatically. So that's what generally one more advantage, wherein you can see in this roles and administrator activities. So this is how an overall the administrative services on a high level note, whichever whatever I'm explaining in today's session, is all about the on a high level note, whatever the roles and responsibilities being an administrator are you going to perform. At the same time, how these access reviews to be performed, all that stuff, followed by this, how these audit logs and all everything will be used accordingly in the last 7 days or in the last 24 hours, followed by everything. All these things can be seen here accordingly. This is how generally the administrator roles and responsibilities in reference to the Microsoft Azure, which normally we will be used in day-to-day activities. So as it is a cloud environment, we have an advantage where we have some cloud accounts which can be accessed for the next 12 months. so that whoever wants to practice themselves and to get some exposure towards these roles and responsibilities as an administrator, people can go through this and they can work accordingly. This is all for today's session, and we are going to discuss about the remaining aspects of administrator roles and all everything in tomorrow's session. See you then. Bye.